Well, thank you. It's good to be here. And when Jim asked me to talk about probably a couple months ago on strategic planning on the day that Fun Fest began, I thought, my goodness, this club's gotten really desperate. But we'll try to make this as entertaining as we possibly can and as informative as possible. So when you, let's see if I can get this to work. This is our purpose statement at the beginning of our strategic plan, and this is what we aim to do. We aim for this document to be our vision, to be the foundation and the direction for how we deliver our services to our customers, and then also to be a guiding document for what we do moving forward in the future. Strategic planning, when you step back and think about it, this cartoon pretty well sums it up. Where's the last strategic plan? It's sitting on the shelf. And that's where we find many strategic plans. And that was very much the case for the city of Kingsport. When I became city manager, this was one of the things that I identified to the board that I felt like we needed to address. It had been well over a decade since the strategic plan that Dave Light helped put together had really actually been looked at. It was stuffed into our budget document every year. We referenced it in the budget document, but we weren't exactly taking that plan and putting it to work each and every day. We also had multiple city departments that were operating off strategic plans. Some of these were being done in silos, others were being communicated across different departments, but there appeared to be some gaps there. So we wanted to make sure that we had that alignment from top to bottom within the organization. We also wanted to make sure that this document was defining a message that we wanted to get out, not only internally but externally as well. And then it was also something that we could step back and look at to see, are we succeeding in the areas that we've stated to our customers that we want to succeed in? Are we able to reflect that to our board? So how are we measuring this and what are those outcomes? So what did we start doing? The first thing was really just to go through and do a complete evaluation of this plan. We went in and we dusted a lot of documents off, documents that have been put on the shelf but yet were still relevant. We avoided the top-down approach, and if you've been involved in this process in the past and wherever, whether that's through a nonprofit, private organization, or a government entity, that is a key point. We wanted this to be able to kind of move up through our organization. I've underlined citizens because during the pandemic, this was extremely difficult. So we really tried to focus on that through other ways. And then the biggest thing was to remove the fear. We were not putting this document together for an award. We were not putting this document together to be a feather in anyone's cap. It was simply to have a stronger communication tool and a tool for us to be able to step back and measure our success. So Jessica Harmon is the assistant to the city manager, and I tasked her about probably 8 months ago to kind of start walking through this document. And what we found as we walked through that, we were very outdated, as suspected. There was things within the document that no longer applied. There was terminology that was no longer relevant. We needed to also clear up some of the redundancy that was in it. And we also needed to step back and take our mission and vision and remove the multiple periods that were in it and simply get it down to something that was very straightforward. I mentioned the fact that we didn't have citizen involvement. Typically in a strategic planning session, you want to have engagement with your customers. That was very difficult, so we had to focus on some other means to do that. So we relied heavily on the communication that we were having with our customers via social media, through the emails, the communications that we did have with them to help kind of guide some of what we had put in place here. And then one of the things that Mayor Scholl has put in place is having an annual strategic planning session. And that was very important from a staff level because that helped us make sure that what we were looking at in budget was going to be critical. The things that we were looking at in the strategic plan would then tie into the budget. I recently heard a statement made by an official here in Northeast Tennessee that said, well, I don't know what we're going to do next year until we pass our budget. And that statement really just kind of struck me because in our budget and what we do, we know what we want to do over the next 5 years. The question is, how much of that can we achieve? And that's often based upon the funding that we have available. I've placed this at your table. I apologize. The mayor is pretty strict on color copies, so many of you all may not have one at your place. When the person next to you falls asleep from this presentation, just take it. But this really summarizes what we have in our strategic plan. You'll see our core values, our 9 goals, our new mission and vision statement, and then the indicators or the global measures we have down there. Those are the things that we want to tie back to, that we're constantly looking at to evaluate our success. This is a great summary of this document. I could probably end the presentation here, but I want you all to have this and be able to reflect on it as we kind of walk through this. So I mentioned what are our core values. Obviously, citizens are at the forefront. This city, more than any city that I have seen in the state and in some situations across the Southeast, does an outstanding job of engaging citizens. It's been something that has been part of the fabric of this city for the now 24 years that I have been here. It helps us gauge the direction we're going. It also helps us having that strong citizen base and the desire that citizens have for the city to do well, to be able to go back and forth on a regular basis to bounce ideas off of them. Integrity, trusteeship, probably one of the cornerstones of what we do. You all and the customers of this city and really put us in responsibility for the dollars that we manage. We take that responsibility very seriously, and that's one of really the hallmarks of this city. It's been talked about in here when you've had your forums, and I greatly appreciate it. I kind of know where the question comes from, this table over here, but we appreciate the support for the council manager form of government. It is a form of government that in some areas across the country is beginning to slip away, but it is a I think, very critical in order to run your city as efficiently and effectively as possible. We talk about our employees, and right now, and we'll touch on this more, but this is one of those things that keeps me up at night. I made a statement at our last board meeting, and that statement was, we're hiring. We're in desperate need of positions, as are most companies throughout our region. But our excellence and innovation is something that we've modified through this strategic plan. A desire to make sure from the grassroots level that we're talking about performance excellence, that we're doing things to make sure that we're constantly evaluating our process, looking for ways to improve that, injecting technology in there where we can. We recently had a great presentation at our board work session where we talked about new development software that we're rolling out that allows the interface between our customer, the builder, and our building department, the design firms, and our plan review process to function so much smoother, and to be able to have instant feedback on if you go in and your house failed the electrical inspection, you know right then. And so your builder is able to get the electrician maybe before they even leave the site and say, hey, I need you to make these corrections so that we can move it forward. And then partnerships. I made a statement at the chamber board meeting on Monday. Kingsport equals partnerships. That's something that C.G. McCartt taught me years ago, and that is so true. That is one of those things that makes Kingsport unique. When I look at other cities just in our region, the relationship we have with our school system, our Chamber of Commerce, especially when you look around the region, that is a unique relationship that we have, and then obviously the business community. So I'll go through these 9 goals, and I've tried to go through in each one and really give you the nickel tour of this. Instead of going through each page and the number of goals and indicators, I've tried just to highlight some of these elements, and then also back into our budget, what we have done in the present fiscal year that we're in. So citizen-friendly government. I think every year we evaluate how this objective, this goal is put into place. But over the last year, with a pandemic and an election, it shined a light on the fact that how we receive information as humans, and then how we push information out as an organization, is vastly different than what we've ever realized. There's a point in time, at least in my house, you got up as a kid. My parents always had WJCW on listening to Dave Hogan. You knew everything there was, as well as what was on sale at the grocery store. And then that evening you watched the news and there was a newspaper, and that's where you got your information. Almost all of those three options, most people are not going directly to those sources. And that was one of the things that we heard during the election process. I didn't know you were doing that. I didn't realize the city had invested money there. And so we're really focusing a lot of our efforts on how do we communicate with our customers. One of the big things that we discussed during a strategic planning session last year with the board was how do we step back and do a citizen survey. I don't know when the last time we did one. And it's something we probably ought to do every 3 years. We've hired a firm through the International City Managers Association to help us with this. We actually begin that process in August. It'll run through November, and about every 3 years we'll repeat that. So we've placed that into the budget. Development, attract, develop, and retain a high-performing workforce. I mentioned one of the things that keeps me up at night is hiring people. We recently lost a city engineer to a private firm at a rate that I could not even begin to provide a counteroffer back to. We are constantly having to go back in and evaluate where we are within our workforce, trying to make sure that we understand what the competitive pay is. Really taking a page from industry and looking at that almost quarterly so that we understand what our competition is. There's more vacancies or there's more job openings in the state of Tennessee right now than there are people unemployed. And so the ability to fill jobs with the present workforce is going to be a challenge, to say the least. What have we done? Probably one of the things that I was proudest of in this budget is we made some fairly significant adjustments to pay, beginning with those entry-level positions that have become highly attractive. If you have a CDL, in many ways it's equivalent to having a doctorate in something because you are in high demand. And so we were able to make a lot of adjustments there. We were also able to once again go back in and do a pay plan adjustment for our employees. I appreciate the board of mayor and aldermen being willing to do that and recognizing the competitive market that we're in. Economic growth and development. If you haven't had a chance to hear John Rose, our new economic development director, speak, you need to. The work that he's doing is outstanding. This is an effort that the board, myself, my staff, we are 100% behind doing this, and that is making sure that Kingsport is the best place to do business. John talks a lot about 1,500 new homes. That number is changing. I will tell you that we are presently in very serious conversations with a development that will have nearly 1,000 units in it. And when you look at that, and that is occurring throughout our city, the reality is that's going to place a toll in some areas on our infrastructure. And so getting out ahead of that, making sure we're working closely with our Kingsport City Schools, making sure that we have the appropriate road network in place, all of that is critical. We talk a lot about residential, but honestly, we're also seeing that with business development, commercial. Last night I was in Knoxville with John Rose and Miles Burdine recruiting a restaurant that is going to be coming to Kingsport in the spring of 22. That's playing out almost weekly with the conversations that we're having, and all those are very positive for your city. Stewardship of public funds. I mentioned this, and I didn't realize John was going to be here. He told me he had to deliver checks, and then Tom Parham explained where the check was going. John inherited the budget office from Judy Smith, and in doing so inherited this streak of 21, but we now have 22. And so John was responsible for 22 years of receiving this distinguished budget award. We put a lot of effort into putting the budget together. The budget is not a quarterly thing. This is 12 months out of the year. I probably have more conversations with John than I do any other leadership team member. I think every day he's either in my office or I'm in his office, having conversations about what we need to do and how we manage these dollars in order to make sure that we're I'll use a line from John Campbell, providing the best services at the lowest possible cost, and that's our goal each and every day. One of the things that we've recently done, Lisa Winkle, our longtime treasurer, has been promoted to our city recorder, CFO. She has a task and she knows this. She came into the interview knowing this. We're at a point where we have a lot of folks eligible for retirement in our finance department. And so one of her tasks will be to rebuild the finance department over the next 2 to 3 years. And that's one of her main goals, along with also implementing a lot of other new technology items within that group. Strong education system. Goes without saying, this is the foundation of our city. We've built the city on education. If you go back and look at some of the early propaganda that we were pushing out across the country to attract people here, we led with education. We continue to do so today. We've also branched out from K-12 to begin looking at higher ed. We continue, has been doing this now for over 20 years. We're now building a relationship with TCAT and looking at opportunities there and how TCAT can partner with our high school, potentially even with our middle school, and then how that same student can be a student at either Northeast State or ETSU or LMU moving forward. Infrastructure. This has been something that has really dominated a lot of our conversations over the last probably 3 to 4 years, as we have talked about how do we reinvest into infrastructure in some areas that is approaching 100 years old. And so a lot of money, a lot of planning documentation, a lot of effort has gone in to make sure that we know what this infrastructure's life expectancy is. We're budgeting accordingly. We're also adding additional dollars when we can, and that was something we did this year. Just in city dollars, $3 million going towards paving, road repair. In addition to that, we've budgeted over $500,000 to pick back up the whole concept of doing a lot of pre-engineering on roads to really try to make them shovel ready to be in a position to do work as we move down the road. Just as we are investing in what you see in the roads, we're also investing underneath in the utilities. If you want to really talk about the biggest utility project we've got going on, that's going to be the rebuild of Main Street. That's basically a utility project with a really nice road on top of it, and hopefully that will be going out to bid soon. Quality of life, that was something that I've been fortunate to have an opportunity to work on, largely through John Campbell having confidence in me. But when you think back at V.O. Dobbins and the work that we did there to renovate that, the Aquatic Center, other parks that we've been able to bring online, this continues to be a primary focus of us. And it really has been a focus of this city for 100 plus years to have a strong quality of life. We're continuing to invest in that work this coming year for the Bays Mountain Amphitheater, as well as a new bicycle park over on Cement Hill. Over in the Brickyard Park area that will be adjacent to the skate park. And then the work that we're excited about with Cement Hill to be able to open that up as a passive park. Safe community. We are really blessed to have a strong police department, an accredited police department. They do an outstanding job. You know, we talked about earlier about employees and hiring and the things that keep me up at night. Well, presently, I think we're down about a dozen police officers that we're trying to bring on board. That's always a concern of ours. We do an outstanding job in the recruitment phase of it, but it's just finding young men and women that want to do this. They do an outstanding job on a lot of special projects, and they've really done a good job in really embracing the strategic planning process, because that really ties into a lot of what they're already doing. And the same is true within our fire department. We have a great group of folks there led by Chief Boyd. They do an outstanding job. This coming year, we'll be focusing on the rebuild of the Justice Center. We'll be modernizing those courts. We'll be adding some space on there, all of which to move what's in the old City Hall at 225 West Center Street out, and to be able to move those folks into that facility. We also will be looking at Fire Station 2 and a new design there. We went through a pretty extensive evaluation of that this past fiscal year to understand what we wanted to do and how we wanted to do that. And so we're now ready to move forward with design. So those basically make up the 9 goals that we have within the strategic plan. And just to expand a little bit more with that, this is the cash budget that we have for this fiscal year. You can see the projects that we have in there, many of which tie directly back into the 9 goals that I mentioned to you. And then this is the projects that we will be bonding, and again, they tie back in to those 9 goals. And some of the highlights of that, again, we're addressing facility improvements. We've been able to, with the relocation into the new City Hall, we've had the opportunity to put one building up for sale, the Midland Center there across from DB. Soon we'll put up the old improvement building there on Market and Shelby. And it's allowed us to focus back in a lot of efforts on our existing facilities. And then you see the other elements that we have there. So there is our strategic plan in kind of a nutshell. And if you would like to have a copy of this, we'll have the budget book put online here probably in August. Is that hopeful? And it will be within that document. So feel free to take a look at that. And I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have.